For all things football...
Wow, you will not see a better goal.
BBC Sounds has got you covered.
These fans have gone absolutely wild.
More live Premier League football than anywhere else on 5 Live.
And there is the whistle, and a brand new season begins.
And the Football Daily podcast.
Everything football, every day.
For all the Premier League action and reaction, listen on BBC Sounds. BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Jane Lewis, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, views and analysis you need. It's Thursday, the 29th of August, and it's another busy day in the national game.
The atmosphere is building, and it's been the week of comebacks, isn't it, with Oasis getting back together, so maybe Kelly can add to that on Thursday night, although I think yours will be a wee bit more like Elvis coming back rather than just leaving no.
Can Kilmarnock leave Copenhagen all shook up at Rugby Park? And...
it's always been and always will be tough place for the opposition to come, so fans at Hearts at Tynecastle are well for third man, and for them it's not going to be easy for them.
We hear from former Hearts star Roman Bednar about how his old club can overcome Viktoria Plzen. And...
Dykes gives chase, he gets there, goal! Lyndon Dykes scores! Late salvation in Oslo for Scotland!
As Lyndon Dykes leaves Queen's Park Rangers and Alex Valle checks in at Celtic, we round up the transfer latest.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, joining us for this podcast is Michael Grant, the Times Scottish football correspondent. Michael, it is a big night. Just very briefly, how much are you relishing it?
Yeah, it's a cracker. It's a shame that the first legs went the way they did with those late goals against the Scottish teams. But fighting chance, Scottish fans, two good atmospheres at Killie and Tynecastle. So let's see how it goes.
Yep, plenty more on that to come with Michael. And as I say, we'll also be hearing from Roman Bednar. And Kilmarnock fan Paul Montgomery also speaks to us ahead of that tie at Rugby Park. But before all that, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Lawrence Shankland is a doubt as Hearts attempt to overcome a 1-goal deficit at home to Viktoria Plzen to earn a place in the Europa League. Shankland has not trained this week, but will be given as long as possible to prove his fitness. Hearts will be without midfield duo Benny Beningmany and Callum Nieuwenhof. Inverness Caledonian Thistle have announced a deal that they say saves the Scottish League One club from administration. The news comes after former chairman Alan Savage revealed the Highlanders were facing a £1.7 million loss. A brief statement reads, an amicable deal has been struck that saves the club from administration. All shareholders should be delighted. And Queen's Park made it back-to-back wins in the SWPL thanks to a stoppage time finish from Abby Callaghan away to Dundee United. And just so you know, there's a bonus podcast this week, which we'll publish as soon as we can after the transfer window closes on Friday night, bringing you the latest news on the last-minute transfers and looking back at the winners and losers of the window. Well, let's start with Hearts, shall we? They take on Viktoria Plzen at Tynecastle in the Europa League qualifying. It's a game you can watch live on BBC Scotland this evening. And the Czech side, Michael, of course, currently 1-0 up following the first leg. How do you see it going?
Well, I think normally you would say that Hearts have a right good chance because the first leg was so tight. They lost it only because of the very, very late goal. They competed well. It's probably their best performance of the season so far, to be honest. And Tynecastle, we know what that can be. We know that can unnerve visiting teams when the Hearts support is kind of on its toes and up for a game. Against all that, though, we cannot overlook how poor Hearts' start to the season has been so far. Still looking for a win after 5 games, 4 defeats in a row, and for all that they were quite good in the Czech Republic last week. There are problems with the team and with the squad. I'm not convinced really that Stephen Naismith knows his best 11 at the moment. I'm not even convinced he knows whether to go with a 3 or a 4 at the back. Nobody's playing particularly well, and maybe more alarmingly than any of that, they're not really creating chances, Jane, and that's going to be an issue when clearly they need to score at least one to take it into penalties, and probably two or more to get through.
Yeah, he has been tinkering with personnel, with formation as well. How important is it for him to get this right this evening? He needs a result and a performance from his players tonight, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, listen, I mean, if they get through, they will have played well. I mean, I know that sounds simplistic, but Viktoria Plzen are too good a side for Hearts to kind of scrape through with a poor performance. They'll be wary of conceding again to them, in fact. Listen, I mean, you look at this Hearts squad and you think there is enough there. If it finally gels, it will click for Hearts. I can't see this run of poor performances continuing, but at the moment, it's not good. The body language doesn't look good amongst some of the players, and it's just not clicking. I mean, I heard that they haven't had more than 3 shots on target in any game this season, which it seems remarkable given some of the attacking quality that they have on paper. So yeah. I mean, to answer your question, they are going to have to play well to beat a pretty accomplished and experienced Czech team.
Well, let's find out what the reaction has been in the Czech Republic to last week's first leg and how Plzen might just be approaching this game in Edinburgh this evening. Phil Goodlad caught up with former Czech international Roman Bednar, who of course spent 3 years at Hearts and is now the manager of FK Motorlet Prague.
Roman, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Scottish Football Daily podcast. Who better to ask than yourself? How has the first leg gone down, Hearts and Plzen?
Well, I have to be honest, because I had work, I saw only second half. But for me, I expected from Hearts more. But also on the other side, Plzen is a very good team, I would say. In the past years, they managed to sometimes be champions. So I think the guys there are doing great work. So for both sides, I think fair result, I would say. But Plzen, I believe Hearts will be much, much stronger home with the fans. And I think they are still in it. And Plzen will have a very tough game in Scotland.
We'll come to the second leg in just a moment. You said that you expected more from Hearts last week. What areas of their performance did you feel were lacking?
Well, the Hearts in the last years little bit changed. What I believe they play more football for me. So I was expecting a little bit more up front because you have one of the best strikers in Scotland, and he had a couple of chances. So if I have a captain like that, for me, he should have 5-6 opportunities every game. The team should play like for him, I would say.
The second leg is an intriguing one because you mentioned that it's back at Tynecastle and you said that Hearts will be better. But how will Plzen approach a trip to Edinburgh this week?
It's a tough question, but because they went 1-0 up, I think they're gonna have a tactical game. I think they're gonna well defend and they will play counter-attack. I think they believe if they score a goal, it's gonna be very difficult for Hearts. But as I said, Tynecastle, my former home, I never ever stopped running for the fun. So I believe it's always been and always will be tough place for the opposition to come. So fans at Hearts at Tynecastle are 12 for third man, and as I said, Plzen, it's not going to be easy for them.
You mentioned a defensive approach from Plzen, perhaps. Star central defender Roman Bednar has moved to Hoffenheim, which will be a loss for Plzen. Will that give Hearts an ability to perhaps attack Plzen, and by attacking them without their main man, that they might find a weakness there?
Maybe, but I believe Plzen, if they release this kind of player, I would say that they believe that they have a good another centre back. You know what I mean? So of course he's gonna be missed because he's a very talented guy, and good luck to him in Germany. But I believe they are still strong. The coach in Czech people, when he started at Plzen, it was very difficult for him because he's kind of old, or they say, he's 72 years old. But he is very good strategic coach. So again, I wouldn't believe they let him go if they don't have like another good centre back. But if you play mind games for Hearts, maybe I would use it. That they lost very good player.
It's an interesting contrast between both dugouts, isn't it? A 72-year-old manager in charge of Plzen and a rookie manager that doesn't have nearly as much experience in Stephen Naismith. How have you viewed Naismith's time in charge so far at Tynecastle?
Well, as you said, he's a rookie coach. I already coached from 34 years old, but on a lower league, because for me, I was very young, so I had a time, you know. I'm not in a hurry anywhere, but you know, this job is always hard whenever you're rookie or whenever you're old. So I think he's doing a good job. I think he's gonna be better, you know, better and better. I think he's a good lad. He's a great character. So for Hearts now, if they stick with him and give him time, he's going to be one day good, I think.
Roman, a couple more questions. It's fascinating to get your insight. Your insight, please, into the second leg. You've mentioned that Hearts will get a 12th man lift from the crowd. It can also work against you at Tynecastle if you're not doing well and the crowd become restless. Do you see Plzen's approach to try and neutralise that crowd and to try and keep Hearts at bay?
Yeah, of course. This is going to be the way, because today everybody knows everybody. So I will not say it's easy, but you have so much information, so you can be prepared for the game. So they already know. And sometimes, as you said, hey, at my time at Tynecastle, it never happened. I don't think the fans was against us. So hey, it's always about the performance of the home team, you know. And what I believe at Tynecastle, I always give everything, and the supporters gives me that back. So, you know, sometimes if you make a mistakes, that's fine. But if you learn from them in the future, but I always ask from my players to give everything. And I believe fans in Scotland and at Tynecastle, if you give everything, they will never turn on you back.
Who do you think will go through this week, Roman?
Well, I said, for me, it's still 50-50. I know it's slight maybe favorite because they are 1-0 up, but for me, it's 50-50. You know, this team is not that experienced as in the past, and if Hearts can score a first goal, it's going to be on.
Roman, just very finally, and I want to thank you for your time because it's fascinating to get your insight. Nothing has changed since you left Scottish football all those years ago. Our clubs, ahead of going into a European tie, they still play a few days before in the league. So Plzen, they had a day off to prepare. They had the weekend off getting ready to come to Edinburgh. Hearts, well, they played and lost against Motherwell on Sunday. Firstly, do you think that that's a factor that our players play in league duty before a European tie? But secondly, and more broadly, European football must look at Scotland and think, wow, the fact that you're playing just days before a big European game, that just doesn't seem right. Is that the view from the continent?
Well, you know, Sparta Prague is playing Malmö for the Champions League, yes? And they also play on a Saturday with Slovácko, and then they drew 2-2. Say Plzen, other hand, and Slavia, they get postponed the games that they didn't play. So I think it's very individual. So maybe if you didn't play the Motherwell game and only this one, maybe you would get the slap this game. For me, if you are a good coach and even if you lost, maybe you can take it positive way. It shouldn't happen on the next game. So for me, again, it's very individual, and I would always prefer how big squad I have, how they approach every game, how the rotation is working. So I don't think it's that bad if the coach will make the right decision for the game against Plzen.
So you don't think it's that big a deal? I wonder, as a player, though, would you have preferred to have had the weekend off before a big European game?
Again, if we are winning, not really. If we are in the right path, not really. As a player, again, if I am scoring every 3 days, I would love to play, you know, and especially on the beginning of the season. It's sometimes different when you are at the end of the season and maybe you are more tired or psychologically or physically. But on the beginning of the season, I would let it on the coach and trust the coach.
Roman Bednar, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Thank you.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
That's the former Hearts player Roman Bednar there, who knows a thing or two about Czech football. Tonight's other big game, of course, Michael, sees Kilmarnock take on FC Copenhagen at Rugby Park for a place in the Conference League group stages. This is a tricky scoreline, isn't it, at 2-0. How do Kilmarnock approach this one? Do they go all gung-ho, looking for the early goal? But because, of course, if they do that, then that maybe opens things up for Copenhagen maybe to sneak another one.
Yeah, tricky is one way of describing it. I think Derek McInnes would privately probably call it a bit worse than that, you know. Listen, it was a really impressive first leg up to a point from Kilmarnock, you know, to be going to Copenhagen and to be drawing, 0-0 until, you know, whatever it was, 75 minutes gone last week. I mean, that's as impressive a result, or it would have been, as any Scottish team have done for a wee while. But the obviously to concede one and then to concede another one really so late was a real sickener. Derek McInnes will not go gung-ho because we know him, you know, and we know his style, and we know that he'll want to bed into the game and keep it competitive and make sure that Copenhagen don't go 3-0 up on in the tie, and then, you know, as the second half goes on, see if he can nick a goal, and then see if the support could maybe rally you to a second one. But Jane, we have to recognise how strong this team is that they're up against. I mean, Copenhagen were in the last 16 of the Champions League earlier this year. You know, they beat Manchester United in a group game last season. They drew with Bayern Munich. So really, it's a formidable position that Kilmarnock are facing tonight, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Copenhagen, obviously a team with a lot of experience. Kilmarnock, it seems to me, a little bit like Hearts, actually. Maybe they're finding that the balance between playing domestic football and European football fairly hard going. They are.
There's no question about it. We talk about this on an annual basis. At this time of the year, the Scottish teams struggle. Kilmarnock have played 8 games this month already, and they've only won one of them. You know, so it's the worst of both worlds, because they're not. It doesn't look like they're going to go much further in Europe, and also their league form has struggled at the bottom of the league. I think it's no goals scored and 9 conceded. You know, so albeit they've played Celtic, but so yeah, it's tough on squads for any team, including the Old Firm, but certainly any of the non-Old Firm teams. But, you know, there's this huge pot, isn't there, of £4 million worthy to get through to the Conference League group stage. And so they will go all in tonight, because there's, you know, the rewards are enormous for the club worthy to do it. But I must admit, I can't see it. I can't see them turning around 2 goals against a team that's good.
Well, that's Michael's thoughts about how are the home faithful feeling ahead of this one. Let's find out, shall we? Let's talk to Paul Montgomery of the Killie Forever and Ever podcast.
The way that the game unfolded last week, we competed so well in the first half, and you're really beginning to think or hope that you can maybe snatch a draw or even a breakaway winner or something to really set up a huge result. But we're conceding the penalty, and the penalty's obviously very soft. It's a VAR penalty that we're seeing so much of these days.
Wow, I don't think there's enough in that for me. I'm amazed that they're bringing him over to the screen to look at that. He maybe does catch him, but I think there's...
Penalty, he's awarded a penalty kick. FC Copenhagen will have the chance to take the lead from 12 yards now. Cameron,
and then a goal in the 96th minute, it kind of takes the shine off it a wee bit.
Cleared by Ennis Cameron, and it comes back on the edge. It's 2-0. The ball's knocked in by Felk on the edge of the area. Ennis Cameron got his head on it. Everybody
felt quite flat last Thursday, but on the flip side, I think if you offered us 2-0 before the first leg, we'd probably have taken it, because there's still at least something to play for. So I think as the second leg draws nearer, the optimism is starting to flow again. So definitely a mixed bag last week, but as kick-off gets closer and closer, we're starting to believe. This is the curse of the football fan. I mean, there's like almost no evidence to suggest that we can beat this team 2 or 3-0. However, as we all know, that the evidence doesn't really come into it. You start to believe. I think the start of the season's not been great for us. We've toiled a wee bit domestically.
Sidibe with the space, and Sidibe with a second. Kilmarnock just stand and watch, but look at that touch from Adama Sidibe.
A couple of things that are in my favour is Derek McInnes seems to be able to pull out a big result when one's needed.
Here comes Armstrong then into the penalty area. Comes a header, comes in there. It's in!
Yes!
Kilmarnock do have the opening goal. It's Joe Wright. It's Tromsø 0, Kilmarnock 1.
I do think at home we're a different team. We've been like that for years now. And I don't think they're brilliant, Copenhagen. I know they're obviously a level above Killie. There's no point in denying that. But the guy I did the podcast with, he's been on the Copenhagen fans podcast and they're flapping a wee bit. The manager's under a bit of pressure. They're not competing well domestically either. So I think the first goal is everything on Thursday night. If we can get the first goal early, get the crowd right behind the players, see what Copenhagen are made of, then you just never know. So I think if we, as a fan base and the players themselves can work in tandem, you're going to get a good atmosphere there. There's a decent number of tickets being shifted. So the atmosphere is building, and it's been the week of comebacks, isn't it, with Oasis getting back together. So maybe Kelly can add to that on Thursday night, although I think yours will be a wee bit more like Elvis coming back really and just leaving no, because it's going to be a bit of a miracle, but miracles happen, so maybe we'll get one on Thursday night.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, Michael, the big question, Elvis or Oasis for you?
I'm not sure it's going to be easy to get tickets for either of them, frankly.
Good answer. Let's talk about the transfer latest, shall we? Celtic have signed the Barcelona left-back Alex Valle on a season-long loan, while Lyndon Dykes has left Queen's Park Rangers. He's signed for Birmingham City on a permanent basis. In terms of that Celtic signing, Alex Valle, a young player coming in at left-back. They were always needing a left-back, but do you still see Greg Taylor being the number one pick in that position?
I think that's an interesting question, to be honest with you. You would have thought that they would have had to say to Barcelona that Alex Valle is going to play, or he's going to play a lot, because otherwise Barcelona wouldn't have given him to Celtic for a year. They've given him a new contract recently. They still clearly think that there's a future for him at Barcelona, so they don't want him stalling for a year and not playing. I find that really intriguing that. Greg Taylor, very experienced, has made a good career for himself at Celtic. Not got long left on his own contract. So I think that's a really intriguing one, but I suspect Valle might turn out to be the player that they do rely on.
Lyndon Dykes moving to Birmingham. What do you make of that move? Of course, he's dropping down, isn't he, to League One? Is that a little bit concerning with the national team in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, you're dropping from the Championship to the third tier. It doesn't seem particularly encouraging. But against that, Birmingham is a team that is really ambitious and going places. I mean, I was down, spoke to people around the club around the time that they played Rangers in a pre-season game, and there's enormous ambition and excitement around Birmingham about coming straight back up to the Championship. They've spent something like £15 million, which in that tier is really high. American ownership, a lot of momentum and excitement there. So I don't think it's necessarily too damaging for Lyndon Dykes to be dropping down if he plays regularly, scores regularly in that division. I'm sure Steve Clarke will still be selecting him.
Yeah, that ambition actually was something that the player talked about actually when he made his move there. So obviously that's very much in his mind. Michael, thank you very much indeed for your time for this podcast. Also thanks to Roman Bednar and Paul Montgomery. And thank you very much for listening as well. Remember, you can see Hearts against Viktoria Plzen live on BBC Scotland from 7:30 this evening. And Sportsound will have full commentary of Kilmarnock against FC Copenhagen on BBC Radio Scotland Extra. Tune into that one from 6 o'clock. There will also be extensive live coverage of both games on the BBC Sports Scotland website and BBC Sport app. And of course, the Scottish Football Podcast will be with you every weekday morning, bright and early. So make sure you follow or subscribe whenever you listen so you don't miss out. The best of luck to Killie and to Hearts in Europe. From us all though, bye-bye.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.